Do you believe a forest could save a girl from being raped by sending a creature nearly 10 feet tall? Emily Hart was lured into the woods by a group she thought were her friends. But what was meant to be a night of laughter turned into a waking nightmare until it appeared. It wasn't the police. It wasn't a good Samaritan. The being that intervened wasn't quite human, nor fully animal, but something else. With swift, terrifying strength, it stopped the attackers cold. Then it carried Emily to safety, into a cave hidden deep in the wilderness, where it healed her wounds, not with words, but with herbs, firelight, and silence. No one believed her, no one, except one man, and the forest itself. This story is drawn from Emily's private journal, from unpublished sketches, and from fragmented memories long buried. She survived, but she was never the same. You'll discover why a nameless creature risked everything to save her, the subtle signs it may still be watching, and why Emily returns to that forest every year. Now, with her daughter, she doesn't speak of it. But in her drawings, the eyes, the hands, the footprints, she tells the story she can't say aloud. And every year, without fail, the forest leaves something behind for her. If you've ever wondered whether the forest has a soul, don't skip this story. It just might change the way you look at the dark. It had been 7 years since Emily Hart last stood beneath the pines of Mount Shasta. The trees still whispered the same way they did when she was a child, swaying with an ancient rhythm no one ever really understood. But now, at 24, returning home didn't feel like returning at all. It felt more like falling backward into a memory she'd tried too hard to forget. The air was thick with that early summer heat, dry but not quite oppressive. A dry wind rustled through the golden grass as Emily stared out the cracked window of her dad's old Chevy. The engine clicked softly as it cooled. Gravel crunched under her boots when she stepped out. The silence of this place wrapped around her like a damp wool blanket. Brian had said it would be good for her. "Just a weekend," he'd promised. "We'll hike a bit, sit by the fire, laugh, drink. It'll clear your head." It sounded harmless. It always did. She hadn't seen Brian in over a year, not since things went sideways. But the text had come late one night, short and sharp like a drunk apology. She didn't answer right away. Then she did. Maybe just to feel something, maybe just to be seen. The trail was overgrown. Her boots kicked up dust, and the sun peeled through the canopy in stripes of gold and shadow. It took an hour to reach the camp. A clearing by the creek, half sheltered by old redwoods and the steep side of a rocky slope. There was a tent already set up. Beer cans glinted in the sun. A Bluetooth speaker spat out something loud and vulgar, a rap beat riding static. Brian grinned when he saw her. That same lopsided smile that used to undo her. But now it just felt borrowed. He hugged her too long, smelled like sweat and cheap body spray. The other three were unfamiliar. Guys she'd maybe seen once or twice around his apartment back in Portland. One was wiry, sunburned, shirtless. Another wore mirrored sunglasses even as dusk approached. The third never said much, just kept laughing at things no one else found funny. They passed her a drink. She declined. Then they passed a second and a third, and eventually she took one just to avoid the eyes watching her too hard. The fire was crackling now, popping resin as the logs settled. Someone threw in something plastic. It hissed and burned green. They laughed. The stories turned crude. Someone started talking about a girl they'd seen skinny dipping last summer. Brian chuckled, but his eyes flicked to Emily. She tightened her jacket around herself. The fire cast shadows that stretched too long and leaned too close. She stood up, said she needed air, that she was going to sketch the creek before it got too dark. No one stopped her. But no one said goodbye either. The woods swallowed her within minutes. The noise of the camp faded behind her, replaced by birdsong and the hush of wind through pine. Her flashlight beam danced over twisted roots and lichen-covered logs. The trail dissolved into underbrush, But she kept walking, needing the distance like breath. Her sketchbook was pressed tight under one arm. Her fingers trembled, not from cold. She stopped by the water, breath shallow. The creek ran slow this time of year. Smooth stones peeked through the surface, slick and glistening like old bones. She crouched, dipped her hand in, let the cold bite her skin. Somewhere an owl hooted low and close. Then, crunch. Behind her, she turned fast. The flashlight flickered. Nothing. Silence. Then voices, soft at first, then louder. A giggle. Someone whispered her name. She spun, but there was no direction to run. Figures slipped between the trees. 3, maybe 4. She backed up, feet sinking into the moss. Her voice caught in her throat. The beam of her light shook violently. Faces emerged from shadow, grinning, glazed, not drunk, but worse. Brian stepped forward. Or what used to be Brian. His smile was all wrong. "Don't be scared, Em," he said. "We just want to talk." The others laughed. One reached for her arm. She twisted away, but stumbled. Her back hit bark, rough, cold. Her knees gave. Another hand reached out, grabbing her sketchbook, tossing it aside. "Come on now," someone breathed near her ear. "Let's make some memories." Her scream cracked the trees. A hand clamped over her mouth. Someone pushed her down hard. Her spine scraped against root and stone. Her jacket tore. She kicked, but they were faster, heavier, practiced. One of them ripped open her sleeve. Another yanked at her belt. Her mind split. Not again. Not like this. The world blurred. Panic suffocated everything. But then, a sound. Not from them. Not human. Low. Earth deep. A growl, like thunder behind teeth. All motion stopped. Branches above them trembled. The fire in her brain dimmed. Her senses sharpened. And then it stepped out from the tree line, massive, still, silhouetted against the moonlight like something ancient and awake, covered in matted dark fur, shoulders broader than any man, eyes not red, not glowing, but gold, deep, watching. One of the men gasped, "What the fu—" But the thing moved, not fast, not rushed, like it chose its moment. Its hand, no, paw or something in between, grabbed one of the attackers by the collar and lifted him. Not slammed, through. The man flew back, hit a trunk, didn't move. The others ran. Brian tripped. The creature didn't chase, just watched. Watched them scatter like insects. Then it looked at Emily. She didn't move, couldn't. It stepped forward. She curled in on herself, ready to be torn apart, but instead it crouched, slow, and then placed something over her, something soft, a pelt maybe, heavy and warm. Its breath was loud. Steam rose in the cold. And then silence again, not gone, still there, just sitting, just watching, just waiting. She ran. No thought, no direction, just legs moving, lungs burning, branches clawing at her skin. The forest became a blur of black and brown and breathless panic. Somewhere behind her, someone screamed. Or maybe it was just the memory of a scream. Maybe it was hers. She didn't know anymore. Everything felt far away, like she was watching herself through a thick pane of glass. Her feet hit something, root, stone, she couldn't tell. And she went down hard, chest slamming into the ground. The wind knocked clean from her. The cold rushed up through the earth, biting into her ribs. She lay there a moment, clutching the dirt like it might hold her together. Then the silence settled in. Not the soft kind. The kind that waits, watching, listening. She rolled onto her back, eyes searching the canopy. No stars, just that thick green-black ceiling pressing down. Her hands were shaking. Her face stung from dried tears, sweat, snot. Her jacket was torn, her jeans scraped. Her body still remembered their weight, their hands, their breath. It clung to her like the mud on her palms. Behind her, somewhere deeper in the woods, she heard footsteps. But they weren't running. Not anymore. Crunch, pause, crunch. Measured, heavy, close. Emily didn't move. Couldn't. Her body was locked between terror and disbelief. Then the footsteps stopped. The silence was worse. She turned her head slowly, cheek pressed to the earth. Eyes wide, breath held. Then a shadow passed through the trees. It wasn't them. It was something else. The shape was too large. The movement too smooth. It moved through the underbrush like it had always belonged there, like the trees themselves made way. Its presence dragged the air down with it, thick and heavy and ancient. And it wasn't gone. Not this time. It stayed. Watching, waiting. Emily crawled backward, slow, dragging her weight over pine needles and cold stone. Her hand caught a branch. She gripped it tight, held it like a weapon she knew wouldn't work. Then, from the edge of her vision, something moved again. Closer this time. Not charging, just arriving. She didn't scream. There was no breath left for that. Only the high-pitched whistle of panic in her throat. Then the thing stopped. In the half-light, it was only a shape. But it had height, shoulders, arms. It breathed loud, deep and slow, like air moving through a cave. She could see the steam from its nostrils, smell the damp musk of fur and forest. One step, two. She flinched, but it didn't come closer. It crouched, carefully, deliberately, like it didn't want to scare her any more than she already was. In its hands, massive, rough, shaped almost like hers, but longer, thicker, it held a strip of fabric, her jacket, the one they'd torn from her, now folded, held out toward her like a peace offering. She didn't reach for it. She couldn't. Her fingers had curled into fists and locked there. The thing laid the jacket down on a flat rock beside her, then straightened again. Its movements made no sound, no snap of twig, no rustle. It turned, slowly, and stepped back into the trees. Not gone, just further, watching from the dark. Emily didn't know how long she sat there. Eventually, the cold crept in again. She pulled the jacket toward her, wrapped it around her shoulders like armor. Her body ached. Her soul throbbed. The woods were darker now, and quiet, but not empty. Something had shifted. A presence. A watcher. She felt it with every nerve. Not just eyes. Intention. And in a strange, fragile way. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of that thing. Not of whatever it was. Later, much later, she would try to explain this part. Not the attack, not the men, but this. The way the thing had appeared, like it had been called, like it had always known. She tried to stand. Her knees buckled. She braced against the rock, pushed up slow. Her head swam. A wave of nausea hit her ribs. She tasted copper. Somewhere behind her, an owl called once, twice. Then silence again, then another sound. Footsteps, lighter this time. Not behind, in front. She froze. From the brush emerged a new figure. Brian. His face was cut, bruised, one eye already swelling. His voice cracked when he spoke. Jesus, thank God. She didn't answer. He stepped closer. I didn't know they'd go that far. I swear. She stepped back. I didn't touch you, he said, palms raised. I tried to stop them. She didn't believe him. You're bleeding, he said, voice thick. Let me help. But she didn't move. Then something behind him stirred, a whisper in the leaves. Brian stopped talking, turned, and went still. He didn't speak again. Not even when the shadow returned. Taller than both of them, broad as a doorway. It stepped out of the dark like the forest had built it. Its eyes met hers. Then Brian's. Brian ran. He didn't get far. The forest swallowed him whole. She never heard him scream. Only the sound of trees parting, and silence. Then the creature returned. Not triumphant. Not covered in blood. Just calm. Watchful. It looked at her. Then turned. Then walked. Not away, but forward. She followed. Because somehow, in a way she couldn't explain, she knew the safest place in the world. was behind the thing the world called a monster, and somewhere ahead was not escape, but reckoning. She followed, not because she trusted it, not because she understood, but because her body moved before her thoughts could catch up. The air was heavier now, as if each step pulled her deeper into a part of the forest the world had forgotten. Her shoes, mud-caked, ripped, slipped on moss-slick stone as she trailed behind the thing that had saved her. She didn't know what to call it. Monster didn't fit. Guardian felt too human. It moved like something older than either word. It didn't look back, but it slowed for her. The space between them held something not tender, not safe, but charged. Like the hum before lightning hits. She limped forward, clutching her arms tight across her chest. Every part of her ached. Her knees burned. Her lip had split. There was blood crusted behind her ear. The cold had gotten inside her skin now, working its way to the marrow. But she didn't dare stop. The creature moved low to the ground, hunched but still towering. Shoulders like stacked logs, arms swinging slow at its sides. The thick coat of fur along its back shimmered with dew under the moonlight, each movement silent except for the occasional creak of a heavy foot on damp wood. It led her not along a path, but through it. Branches bent aside as if recognizing it. Roots twisted away like they knew not to trip the girl walking behind. And then it paused. Ahead, the woods opened just enough to reveal an outcropping of stone pressed into the hillside. A dark hollow yawned beneath it, framed by vines and scattered leaves. Not a cave, not quite a den, just enough shelter for the night. It gestured, one massive hand open, palm down, then moved to sit a few feet from the entrance. Not inside, not beside her, guarding. She stepped forward slowly, knees shaking, and ducked into the space. The air inside was damp and smelled like crushed pine and wet fur. It was small but dry. She collapsed into the far corner, curling her limbs inward, hugging herself like she could shrink enough to disappear. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Time didn't work right out here. She didn't speak. It wouldn't have mattered. Her voice felt buried somewhere behind her ribs. What was there to say? Thank you? Are you real? Why didn't you kill them? Instead, she just sat, listened. Outside, the creature exhaled, long and steady. Then, something strange. It stood, disappeared into the trees again. Silence. She thought it had left her. Her heart dropped, but then, rustling, heavy footfalls returning. When it stepped back into view, its hands were full. Moss, a wide leaf folded like a bowl. Inside, berries, blue, red, orange. It crouched, placed the food on a flat stone near the den's edge, then backed away. Sat again. No words, no gesture, just presence. She stared at the offering, chest tight. She didn't want to eat. But hunger is louder than fear. After a moment, she crawled forward, picked one up with trembling fingers, brought it to her lips. It was sweet, strangely sweet, like summer after rain. One by one, she finished them. The juice stained her fingertips, ran sticky down her chin. She wiped it with her sleeve, then leaned back against the stone, legs outstretched, and she watched it. The creature sat still as carved earth, its head slowly turning with every shift in the wind. Listening, smelling. Every few minutes, it scanned the trees. Not nervously, intentionally. Like it knew something she didn't, like it always had. Her eyes grew heavy, not because she was safe, but because exhaustion doesn't wait for safety. She drifted in and out. In one half-dream, she saw it closer, its face clearer, the brow low and shadowed. The mouth shaped wrong, too wide, too flat. But the eyes weren't wrong. They weren't wild. They didn't burn. They mourned. And for some reason, that frightened her more than the growls had. She woke with a start sometime deep into the night. A sound, sharp, breaking, echoed across the woods. A tree cracking. Far off, not near, but enough to make her scramble to sit up. The creature was already standing, still, alert, its body angled toward the sound, nostrils flaring. Emily held her breath. But nothing came. Whatever had been out there had moved on. Or stopped. The thing relaxed again, just slightly. Sat back down, arms resting on its knees. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't ask what it knew. But somehow, in the silence, the answer hung there anyway. It wasn't alone out here, and neither was she. She slept again, this time without fear gnawing at her heels. When the morning came, soft and gray with fog, her body screamed in pain, every muscle sore. But she was alive, and the creature was still there, waiting. She didn't know why. But she stood, wrapped the pelt tighter around her, stepped out from the hollow, and followed it again, wherever it was taking her. She no longer resisted, because something in her gut knew. What happened last night was not the end. It was the debt, and the forest never forgets what it's owed. It didn't walk like a thing that lived in fear. Each step was steady, weighted, almost quiet, but not careful. It knew the forest, moved through it like it belonged to it, or maybe the other way around. Trees didn't resist it. The earth didn't protest. As Emily limped behind, struggling with the pain still pulsing through her legs, she noticed the way roots seemed to bend away, the way low branches lifted slightly before she reached them, as if his presence softened the woods somehow, like they'd seen him pass through for generations and learned to make room. Her breath fogged in the early morning air. The cold still clung to her skin like a second layer of damp clothing. The pelt wrapped around her shoulders had the musky scent of old bark and wild animal, but she didn't take it off. It made her feel shielded, like whatever it had been through. It could bear her now, too. He didn't turn to check on her. He didn't need to. She stumbled once, caught her toe on a raised root, and nearly fell face first into the loam. Before she hit the ground, a massive hand was suddenly there, catching her under the arm with a gentleness that didn't fit its size. Not lifting, just steadying. Then gone. As if touch was something it granted only for balance, not for comfort. She didn't say thank you. The silence had grown into something sacred now. Like sound would tear it. They kept walking. The canopy thickened, the daylight thinning into long green shadows. Farther from any trail. Deeper than she'd ever gone. The air changed too. Damp, still, almost ancient. Her ears popped slightly like they were descending into something below sea level, though the ground stayed flat. Every so often, she caught a strange, low humming in the trees. Not from the creature, from the woods themselves. Like the wind had a voice, but chose to whisper only to him. Then it stopped. She nearly ran into its back. Ahead was a large fallen redwood, split open from rot and weather, its trunk hollowed like a natural arch. Beyond it, a gentle slope dropped into a hollow. Ferns grew thick there, and the filtered light made everything glow green. At the center of it all stood a cluster of massive stones, boulders, moss-covered, leaning together like fingers steepled in prayer. The thing crouched, not because it was afraid, because it was home. Emily stood at the edge of the space, unsure if she was meant to enter. Her knees trembled, not just from pain, but from something deeper. The sense that crossing that threshold would mean more than changing location. It would mean being seen in a way she wasn't ready for. He looked back at her, finally. His eyes weren't bright. They didn't glow, but they held something that stopped her breath. Memory, maybe grief. Something too human and too old to be faked. She stepped forward without realizing her feet had moved. The space was quiet. Still, he sat near the stones, cross-legged, his back straight, like he'd done it before, like it mattered to him. He watched the trees now, not her. She lowered herself slowly to the mossy ground, every muscle tight, every bruise reminding her of the night before. Her breath was shallow. The pelt still clung to her. She clutched it tighter. There were markings on one of the boulders. Not writing, just deep carvings, lines intersecting in deliberate shapes. Circles, angles, not decorative at all. Her fingers itched to draw them, but her sketchbook was long gone, tossed somewhere back in the dirt and blood. She traced the grooves in the stone instead, gently. They were warm, warmer than they should have been. The creature hadn't moved, but his breathing had slowed. He wasn't sleeping. He was listening. Her stomach growled. He stood, turned away, disappeared into the woods again, and returned, arms full. Berries again. Nuts. A handful of mushrooms she wouldn't have trusted from anyone else. He placed them on a flat patch of bark and pushed it toward her. She ate. Not because it was good, because it was offered. Because somewhere between the scream and the silence, something had shifted. She wasn't prey here. She wasn't even a burden. She was a guest. And somehow, this place, this moment, felt safer than her apartment back in Portland. Safer than that night with Brian. Safer than anywhere. She finished eating, wiped her hands on her jeans. Then something strange happened. The creature reached into a pouch strapped across its body, leather stitched from something thick and old, and pulled out a flat, round object. A stone, polished, black as obsidian but matte, not shiny. He set it gently on the moss between them, then tapped it with a single finger. She stared. No explanation, no demand, just presence. So she leaned forward, touched it. It was smooth, cold, but pulsing, not with heat, with memory. Her eyes welled. She didn't know why. The forest felt heavier again, not threatening, witnessing. Then the creature stood, slowly, like something sacred was over. He turned his back, walked to the edge of the hollow, and looked up toward the ridgeline. He waited. She stood finally, limbs aching. She followed. They climbed in silence, the slope uneven and slick with last night's rain. Roots wrapped around their ankles. The light shifted again, brighter now, clearer, blue sky threading through leaves overhead. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the first hum of a car engine. Civilization. He stopped at the crest. She stepped up beside him. Below, far in the distance, she could see it. A single cabin roof, smoke curling from the chimney. The edge of her grandfather's land. She felt her chest catch. When she turned to look at him, he was already backing away, not turning, not walking, just fading. The trees took him, one shadow at a time. She didn't call after him, didn't ask anything, because some answers don't belong in the daylight. And whatever he was, he wasn't leaving her. Not really. The forest had seen her. It had answered. And it had given her back. But not unchanged. Never unchanged. The cabin was closer than she thought, but farther than she could walk alone. Her legs ached like something old and rusted, and each breath dragged behind her ribs like broken glass. But she kept moving, step by step, through brush and mud and the bite of the early light. Every few minutes, she'd lose her footing, stumble against a rock or low branch, catch herself with hands scraped raw and bleeding. Still, she kept going because he was still there, not beside her. Ahead, always just far enough to not seem protective, but never far enough to feel alone. He didn't offer his hand. He didn't need to. His silence said more than words ever could. They crossed a dry creek bed. Sunlight began to sift through the canopy, soft and pale. Her breath formed clouds in the chill. She wrapped the musky pelt tighter around herself, not caring that it still smelled like damp fur and wild soil. It was warmth, and it was his. He slowed as they reached the last stretch, the edge of the clearing. The trees thinned. Through the trunks, the world began to take shape again. The outline of her grandfather's cabin, sloped roof, faded green tin, a plume of smoke curling from the chimney, like a picture that had waited in stillness until she returned to it. She stopped, her throat locked. She hadn't even realized how long she'd been holding her breath. He turned, slowly, his face half cast in shadow, half in gold. They stood there like that, a girl and a giant, a memory and a myth. The air between them felt too wide to cross. Then he did something she wasn't ready for. He raised his arm, not waving, just a gesture, slow, palm tilted forward. A goodbye older than language. And then he backed away. Not fast, not frightened, just finished. She watched him vanish into the tree line. No snap of twigs, no rustle of branches. Just gone, like he had never been there to begin with. And yet, the silence he left behind rang louder than any scream. Her feet didn't move at first. Her body didn't trust the moment. Her soul didn't want it to be over. But it wasn't, because the forest still watched. And deep down, she knew he was still near, not to protect her, but to see what she would do next. So she stepped out from the trees, the sunlight hitting her face like a slap. The sudden brightness made her squint. She crossed the clearing slowly, one foot dragging behind the other. She didn't try to fix her hair, didn't wipe the dried blood from her chin. Her jacket hung open, ripped. Her jeans were soaked at the knees. Her hands shook. The cabin door creaked open before she reached it. Her grandfather stood in the doorway, a cup of coffee trembling in his hand. The old man's face paled. For a second, he didn't speak. Then the mug dropped to the porch, shattering against the steps, and he ran down to her like he hadn't run in years. He caught her in his arms, held her tight, kept whispering her name like saying it could make her whole again. She didn't cry. Not then. Her body was too tired to produce anything more. He helped her inside, wrapped her in a blanket, set her down near the fireplace, where the warmth crawled slowly into her bones. Then came the questions. What happened? Where did you go? Who did this to you? But she didn't answer, not for a long time. When she finally did, her voice came out cracked, soft. I wasn't alone. And somehow, he didn't ask her to explain that part. The town doctor arrived later that afternoon, drove his truck straight up the dirt path, boots muddy, breath huffing in the cold. He checked her wounds, cleaned the cuts. Looks like someone out there knew what they were doing, he muttered as he unwrapped her arm. This dressing's better than I've seen in a few hospitals. She stayed silent. The sheriff showed up next, hat in his hand, a notebook ready, asked his questions slow but firm. She told him some of it. The men, the attack, the escape. Not all of it, not him. When she finished, he looked at her like someone trying to decide between truth and trauma. Well, he said after a beat, we'll get a search party going. There's tracks back in the North Trail. Looks like something, dragged one of those boys off into the woods. We'll find him. Her grandfather shifted, cleared his throat. Maybe don't go too deep. That part of the forest has its own rules. The sheriff glanced at him like he was crazy, then back at her. He nodded once, scribbled something in his pad, and left. That night, Emily sat alone in the dark, staring at the window. The moon hung full and pale above the tree line. Somewhere out there, the thing that saved her still walked, still watched. Not because he owed her anything, but because he didn't forget, and neither would she. Not the face, not the silence, not the way his presence filled the world like thunder without sound. She pulled the pelt tighter around her shoulders, closed her eyes, let herself remember not the violence, not the fear, but the moment he had stopped and placed that leaf full of berries by her side. That small act, that stillness, that impossible grace. She didn't sleep much, but she didn't tremble anymore. And in the very early hours, just before dawn, she swore she heard a low exhale outside her window, a sound not meant for her ears, just a reminder. The forest does not forget, and neither do its shadows. The world looked different in the morning. Nothing dramatic, just the quiet shift of reality settling back into place. The cabin walls still creaked, the kettle still hissed when it boiled. The birds still called from the same branches they always had. But Emily moved through it all like someone underwater. She heard everything, but nothing touched her. Not really. Her grandfather didn't ask many more questions. Not after the first night. He just left things out for her. Blankets folded on the couch, toast by the stove, fresh clothes laid across the back of a chair. He kept the fire going. He sat nearby when she wanted company, and when she didn't, he disappeared into the other room and let her be. 3 days passed like that, maybe 4. She couldn't tell anymore. Time had folded in on itself somewhere between the scream in the forest and the silence that followed it. Then, on a morning colder than the rest, she stepped outside barefoot and stood on the porch. Mist clung low across the clearing, curled around her ankles. The grass was wet. Her breath hung in the air. And something inside her clicked into place. She needed to go back, not to the place it happened, to the one who had carried her away from it. She didn't know what she'd find, or what she'd even say. But the stillness had started to feel too clean, like if she stayed here long enough, the edges of what had happened would begin to blur. And she needed them sharp. She packed a small bag, water, flashlight, her sketchbook. A handful of dried fruit her grandfather had tucked into a tin. Then she slipped the fur pelt over her shoulders again. It still smelled like him. The deep, ancient musk of wildness and something older than wild. He didn't try to stop her. He watched her from the doorway as she walked into the tree line, and then she was gone. The forest welcomed her differently this time. Not softer, not safer, just familiar. She moved slower, more deliberate, not out of fear, but because she didn't want to miss anything. The way the wind shifted when she stepped past certain trees, the way the undergrowth leaned away like it remembered her. The forest had changed in her absence, or maybe she had. Either way, it no longer felt indifferent. She found the creek by late afternoon. The water was shallow, almost dry. She crouched by the edge and touched the smooth stones. One had a crack down the middle, like something heavy had stepped on it. She followed the creek upstream, past the moss-covered boulders and broken ferns, until she saw it. A single footprint, pressed deep into the mud, twice the size of her own. 3 toes, wide heel, edges still clean. It was fresh. Her chest tightened. She stood slowly, listened. The woods were quiet, too quiet. She stepped forward again, careful, eyes scanning the brush. No movement, but she felt it. That shift in the air, that charge, like being watched from behind a one-way mirror. Then came the sound, soft, behind her. A crackle of branch, a push of breath. She turned, and there he was. Not 10 feet away, just standing, still as a statue. Massive, silent, his shoulders lifted with each breath, slow and heavy. His eyes, not glowing, not sharp, just there, watching, seeing. She didn't move. Neither did he. Then, slowly, carefully, she reached into her bag, pulled out the sketchbook, opened to a blank page. Her fingers trembled as she drew. Lines forming shapes. Not his face, not exactly. Just the shape of him. The curve of his shoulder. The slope of his brow. The way the forest seemed to bend around him without touching. She tore the page out, stepped forward, placed it on a low rock between them, then backed away. He didn't react at first, but his eyes dropped, looked at it, then back to her. And for a moment, just one, he let his head lower. Not a bow, not a nod, just acknowledgement. She exhaled, didn't realize she'd been holding it. They stood there for a while. No clock, no words. Just the fading light and the weight of a bond neither of them could name. Then he turned, started walking, not into the trees, along the creek. She followed. He didn't look back, but she knew it was for her. The path he took was gentle, curving, avoiding steep climbs, skirting patches of bramble, choosing ground that was firm underfoot. He remembered, or he just knew. She didn't care which. They walked for over an hour, through the changing light, into the cooler shadows of evening, until they reached a small clearing she'd never seen before. In the center, another circle of stones, smaller this time, arranged like a nest. She didn't ask why. She just knew this was where he meant to leave her. He stopped, turned, faced her one last time. And in that quiet moment, under the last light of the day, she saw him. Not just the fur, the muscle, the sheer size of him. She saw the tired in his eyes, the burden, the knowing. She stepped forward, only one step, close enough to see the scar that ran down his shoulder. Then she whispered, "I remember." It wasn't much, but it was enough. He blinked, then turned, melted back into the trees, gone. She stayed in the clearing until the stars came out. Then she walked the rest of the way home, alone this time. But never alone again, because once the forest sees you, it never stops watching. And somewhere out there, something walks behind you, not to haunt you, but to make sure you keep walking forward. The headline said she was lucky. Local woman found alive after forest attack. Miracle in the mountains. A few even tried to frame it as a survival story. How one brave woman escaped the Shasta woods. None of them got it right. They didn't print the truth because they didn't want it. They wanted her fear, not her faith. They wanted the trauma, not the transformation. They wanted something digestible. Emily Hart had become a bite-sized headline they could sell, but the real story was too big for print. She watched them talk about her on TV from the couch of her grandfather's cabin, one leg wrapped in gauze, one arm still bruised yellow and green. The anchorwoman smiled as she read her name off the teleprompter like it meant nothing. Emily muted the volume. The sheriff came back. He always came back. Some part of him couldn't let it go. Said they found one of the boys 1.5 miles from where she was discovered. Or what was left of him. Something had crushed the rib cage. Left teeth marks they couldn't match. Claw wounds they couldn't explain. They asked if she remembered anything. She said no, and they didn't believe her. But they didn't push. Because when someone survives something like that, you let them keep their lies. The other 2 boys lawyered up, swore it was all misunderstanding. They tried to paint her as unstable, said she was drunk, that she ran off into the woods, that she hallucinated. One even said she attacked them first, but they couldn't explain her torn clothes, the blood, the bruises in places hands shouldn't go, or the footprints found in the dirt, massive, deep, leading away from the clearing. The sheriff pulled her aside, quietly. Not like a cop, more like a man trying to thread a needle with shaking hands. "There's old stories, you know," he said. "Ones my grandfather told me when I was a boy. About the woods, about something that watches." She didn't respond, but she didn't need to. He just nodded, then left. The doctor took one look at her wounds and said she was lucky not to have gone septic. Said the moss packed in the cuts had antibacterial properties. Said it looked intentional, like someone knew what they were doing. He didn't believe it either, but science was easier to accept than something with golden eyes and a breath like thunder. When they asked her to sit down with a trauma counselor, she agreed. They gave her a woman with soft hands and too many framed diplomas. She asked the right questions, took notes with a pen that never clicked, kept eye contact too long. Emily didn't lie. Not exactly. She just told the parts that felt like fiction. Then she told the fiction that felt like truth. After 3 sessions, the woman said she was healing well, that she had remarkable insight, that she was processing her experience with maturity. Emily smiled politely, then stopped going. Back at the cabin, she started drawing again. Not people, not faces, shapes, eyes, the curve of a jaw, the texture of fur under moonlight, the hands, always the hands. Her grandfather didn't say much, just watched her sketch, brought her tea, left her alone when she needed space. One evening, he pulled a box from the attic. Dusty, heavy, smelled like cedar and memory. Inside were old photographs, yellowing letters, a compass that no longer pointed north. At the bottom was a leather-bound notebook. The cover cracked, the pages soft with age. "Your great-uncle kept it," he said. "Used to hike these woods every summer. Swore he saw something out there. Wrote it all down. We thought he was crazy." She opened it. The handwriting was slanted, hurried, desperate. There were entries about sounds at night, shadows in the fog, massive footprints by the creek, and one sentence, scribbled underlined twice. "It watched me, but it didn't hate me." She closed the book. Didn't sleep that night. Instead, she walked out to the porch, wrapped in the pelt he left her with. The stars were sharp above the tree line. The wind moved slow. No sounds, no owls, no coyotes, just the breath of the forest. She waited. She didn't expect him to come. But somehow it felt rude not to show up. The next morning she found a single stone on the porch railing. Black, smooth, round as a river egg. Not just placed, positioned. And under it, a feather, long, white, from no bird she could name. Her hands shook when she picked it up, because it meant something. Not goodbye. Not yet. Just, I remember. And somewhere deep in the woods, something still watched. Not to judge. Not to protect. Just to witness. And that meant she couldn't forget either. She packed her bag again. Not to run. Not to escape. Just to return. Because she wasn't afraid of the woods anymore. Only of the world that pretended it had all the answers.